Thank you. Okay. Good evening, and thank you all for attending this meeting of the Walsall Council Audit Committee. My name's Andy Green, and I am the independent member and chair of the Audit Committee. Committee is meeting in person in the conference room 2 of the Council House with appropriate social distancing measures in place. The meeting will be conducted using the hybrid system so as to enable both meeting to be streamed on YouTube and officers to contribute remotely as required. Any voting required this evening will be by way of show of hands, and I shall report that vote outcome, and that vote outcome shall be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. The agenda and reports for this meeting are available on the Council's website. In order to proceed, I shall now call each committee member present in turn to introduce themselves and to confirm that they can see and hear the proceedings. So, Councillor Joel.
Hello, I'm Councillor Satcher of Halper Streetley, and I can see and hear.
Councillor Ian
Robertson.
Councillor Ian Robertson for Blakenhall Ward, I can see and hear.
Councillor Flint.
Councillor Gary Flint, Bloxbridge East Ward, I can see and hear.
Thank you. From Councillor Martin has apologised, and we have the councillor substituting.
Yeah, and Councillor Stacey Elson, Willinghall North Ward, substituting for Councillor Rose Martin.
Thank you. Nikki, do we have any other apologies?
We've also got apologies for Soraya Ajas.
And Soraya's the independent member.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. I can confirm that we have a quorum for the meeting, so we'll proceed to the agenda. To move them, please.
I'll move, Chair.
Thank you. And a seconder. Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, declarations of interest and party whip. Are there any declarations of interest to record? No? Thank you. Item 4, deputations and petitions. Nikki, have we had any?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 5 is the Local Government Access to Information Act. And I would ask members and the public to note that item 7 contains exempt information under the Local Government Access to Information Act 1985. And I hereby move that we enter private session at the conclusion of agenda item 16. I'd like that to be moved and seconded, please, by councillors. Thank you. And seconded. Thank you. Carried. Item 6 is any notification of any issues of importance for consideration for future meeting. Councillor Robertson, I believe there is one.
It was something which one would like to run past Sarah Knowles when she comes to give her report, but I do have some issues about the Transformation Fund and Better Care Fund as to whether not the actual what it's spent on, but an actual audit trail could perhaps be investigated and reported to this committee.
Okay. We do have on the agenda, Councillor Robertson, the audit plan for 22-23. Might it be appropriate for us to discuss that item there and have the committee consider your request?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Item 7 is the committee decision tracking chart, and this is just a piece of information that we've kept running and I hope is helpful to all. It doesn't require any approval, but if there are any questions from any committee members, please let us raise them now. No? Okay, thank you. Item 8 is the update on the debtors position. As I recall, this was raised at a previous meeting of the Audit Committee where the committee asked for further information on the analysis of the debtors within the financial statements. And I believe is Rob Page with us? So Rob, are you there in the ether somewhere? Welcome. Would you, I think you might be muted though, Rob.
I am, yes.
We've
Thank
got
you, Chair.
Okay. So would you like to take us briefly through? It's a very comprehensive
Yeah.
paper. So take
Yes.
us through step by step if you can, please.
Yes. Okay, Chair. So as the Chair has just mentioned, you requested this report to be brought to yourselves as a result of the final accounts papers which were presented back in September and November. So we've done a review of the current debtors position for the debtors which were outstanding at that time, and split them into the three categories, which are the sundry debtors, which are the invoices we raise normally for the council, council tax debtors, and non-domestic rate debtors. So over the last year to date, we have seen a significant collection of both the sundry debtors and domestic rate debtors, and over the period we've collected £32 million worth of the debtors which were outstanding out of the 68. If we concentrate on sundry debtors first, what can be seen is that the majority of the debtors at the 31st of March, which was the year end, the majority of that was actually owed by the CCG to Walsall, with the majority of the rest being social care clients and Walsall schools. We have been working with the CCG to get the debtors paid off, and to date we've had half the amount back, and we are in negotiations with them to get the remaining debtors. For social care clients, this is a bit more difficult in that some of these will be on payment plans because there may be significant debtors within that. So we are working on that, and there's also a review of the charging policy and associated processes which is going on, which is being reported to Cabinet. The Walsall schools, we've collected all but a handful of the invoices for those. So at present, we are relatively happy with how the collection performance is going with the sundry debtors. For the council tax debtors, this gets to be a bit more complicated in that for council tax debtors, we do enter into payment plans for nearly all of these, and it's means tested. So we are collecting. We were, until this year, we weren't able to take any active collection measures, although we are now able to do that. However, there is a corresponding backlog within the court system, which is also hampering us in getting the debtors paid off at this present moment. And this will also apply to the non-domestic rate debtors, where we have issues in being able to chase up through the court system because of the backlog there. But also there may be an element within here for the 2021 specifically, where the companies have actually gone into administration. Where they go into administration, we do have difficulties in getting any of the domestic rate debtors repaid because we would be low down in the chart of debtors within the administrator chart. However, we have reviewed the bad debt provision as well for all 3 categories, and we are confident that we have sufficient bad debt coverage, especially for things like domestic rates, where we've got enough bad debt provision to actually cover 41% of all debtors. So that's a significant coverage. So any questions?
Okay, any questions from members?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, what is the actual delay at the moment? I mean, the courts are way behind as far as
Yes.
prosecutors are concerned. What is the actual delay at the moment? I mean, and those firms that have gone into administration, fortunately, it tends to be the banks that have the priority as far as recovering the money. Is that right?
Yeah. So we are actively chasing, but the issue is we get where we need to take court action, we then go into the queue of everybody else taking court action at the same time. Therefore, it has a knock-on effect as to when we're actually able to take the appropriate action at that time.
I think the other thing to add here as well, Chair, if I might, is that clearly pandemic has had a significant impact, and actually government policy in respect of being able to actually collect and change debt. So we've been mindful of that, but some assurance can be given because our overall collection rate, particularly on council tax, has been is still expected to be about 98% overall. It may take longer to collect that. In 2021, I think the overall collection rate went down to about 93%, which is a significant drop, but it is climbing back up. It's over 94 in-year collection rate now. So we can see a movement upward, positive way, but clearly it will take longer to collect that debt. Mindful also of people's position at this point in time, residents, in collecting that and doing so in a way that's appropriate. So where possible, obviously, arrangements will be being put in place, and we're obviously, but clearly we have to collect that debt, and we will be collecting the debt, but it might take a little bit longer to do so. Yeah, and it's forecast it's going to be about 2 years before the backlogs are all caught up, and it will be business as normal as pre-pandemic.
Okay. Any other questions from members, Councillor Flynn?
Yeah. Obviously, looking at the tables, there's like a decade of previous debt. Is there a write-off period when this will disappear off the council's finance sheets? So we basically, where are you referring to the sundry debtors or the council tax and NDR debtors? Where's the council tax and NDR debtors? We basically chase those until there is absolutely no possibility of getting any of the money back. So for council tax, we have got plans and everything for people who are still paying back, and it's over 10 years since they incurred the debt, but that's because it's on a means tested basis. NDR will chase them until the company doesn't exist. And where it's sundry debtors, again, the majority of the debtors, which are now over 10 years old with that, are also related to social care clients, which therefore we are with payment plans and things like that to get the money back off them as well. But we do review whether the debtors do need to be written off on a regular basis, which is part of the services and the accounts, the debt collection team do that review. Thanks for that. I've got another question. On your presentation, you referred to obviously the CCG be one of the biggest sundry debtors. You mentioned that you was negotiating. Is that negotiating the price or a time frame?
It's the time frame. Yeah, it's the time frame for that. So, it's not the actual value. The value is set. It's the time frame because at the present moment, the CCG are actually having trouble in getting the payments out
which is the reason why we're looking, trying to negotiate the time frame for them.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Okay.
Councillor Robertson, can I just follow that one up, please? Unless yours is allied to that line of question about the CCG, could I follow that one up and bring you back in there? Clearly, Rob, there's the new Health and Social Care Act moving through Parliament at the moment, integrated care partnerships and arrangements.
Yes.
Is that a concern for the council in terms of these levels of debts that you've got, and the fact that you're now having to negotiate time frame where the CCGs and whoever replaced them, the integrated care boards, etc.
Yes.
Is there any chance at all that there might be a seepage of money? Debt?
That one, there is a possibility. However, at this precise moment, we are confident that we'll be getting the money paid to ourselves. The integrated care board will be basically derived from the Black Country and West Birmingham CCG. So Walsall CCG was subsumed into the larger CCG this year in preparation for it to become the integrated care board.
So there's no considered risk then in terms of seepage from local authority into the health precept?
If I can answer that.
Yeah, go.
Rob. Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
not at this point in time. Obviously, what we're trying to do is learn from the lessons and improve our processes to speed up. A lot of it's, as Rob says, is timing, and actually it's the amount of data, actually having to check all the data and the clients, etc. So it's taken some time to do that and the backlog there. So what we're trying to do is speed up those processes so that we can actually receive the payments quicker.
It's a future arrangement that I hope you've also got an eye on as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Councillor Robertson, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. How much of this long-term debt is due to the fact that the debtor has died? I presume that you follow it, you still follow it up, you don't write it off or anything.
Clearly. Sorry, Rob, I'll just.
Okay.
Sorry, okay. Rob. Yeah, I was just saying, obviously if we have a deceased client, then that depends on the value of their estate. If they have any estate, if they have estate, then obviously then we would seek to recover from that estate.
I think one of the things for me, Rob, that comes out of it is that the level of debt that you've got around social care and social care clients. And of course, council tax, given where we've been over the past 2 years, given the demographic of Walsall and the sort of amount of poverty and unemployment that we've got in the borough as well now. Is there an estimate that, or an anticipation that we're likely to see more debt? And what will be the impact on the statements, the financial standing of the authority as you move forward? And presumably, you'll need to recover that debt and the ongoing debt through council tax increases.
So we do monitor this on a regular basis, and we're going forward at the moment in 21-22. We haven't seen a significant increase in the overall level of debt when you take new year debt into account, with the continuing debt, which is on this page. We do review this, and we're relatively happy that we are actually getting the collection rate back up to where we were previously. So there's no significant increases occurring at the moment.
Okay.
As Vicky said, it's the same with council tax and the business rates, that we can see that the actual collection rates are increasing there as well towards what they previously were. And
clearly it's a difficult job for the council to be able to balance how you manage that debt and sensitivities to the population, and it's good to hear back that is taken on.
Yeah.
I'm sure the committee would welcome that approach. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Rob, that's a very comprehensive report for bringing that to our attention. I don't think there's any approvals or anything else that we need, so we'll note the report and thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, item 9 is the external audit report, and that's Grant Thornton. Is John or Andy with us tonight, or both?
Thank you, Chair. Both of us here
Welcome.
tonight.
Folks. How are you?
We're well, and good evening to you and to the members of the committee. I have trouble with my camera on my PC, so I'm going to turn it off before it freezes, but I'll carry on in sound if that's okay with the committee. And Andy is also here to support me with this, take you through the report and to answer any questions the committee may have. So, to introduce the auditor's annual report, this is a new report. It's an important report. It's an important sort of step forward, really, in terms of council audit reports. It's the first of its type. The National Audit Office has sought to refresh the work that auditors do on the value for money audit, which was felt was being a little bit stale and maybe a little bit one-dimensional. Members will recall that we reported by exception. We had a much more limited scope, and it probably felt that we were rehearsing the same material year on year. So this new piece of work now is intended to refresh that. This is the first of our auditors' annual reports under the new code of practice, so I would be interested in members' feedback on the document as well. So the purpose of the document is to report more holistically to members what we think about your arrangements in 3 areas, and that's financial sustainability, governance, and arrangements for improving economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. In other words, performance arrangements. And it's not intended to produce material that's a surprise to you, but it is intended to give you assurance that from our independent perspective, we've had a good look at the council's arrangements and have given those arrangements sort of formal consideration, and whether we think they're sort of strong arrangements or we have no concerns with those arrangements, you can get assurance from that, in that we are saying that from our independent perspective. We also bring our lens to this, comparing what Walsall Council do to other councils. The first point on this report is the date on page 1. It's 20th of December, and that's a very early date, actually, in terms of the round of these new reports. It was one of the first ones that we completed, and I think you can take some credit from that. I think it's the fact that the council works very well to present its information to us, and that we get a good smooth audit process is really sort of indicative of how quickly then we can produce the reports and report to this committee. So the other sort of point I wanted you to sort of reflect on is, having read the report, do you recognise Walsall in what we say? It's an independent commentary, as I said, but it's also important that you can see your own arrangements and you can get a sense of what we are saying about those arrangements, and very much recognise what we're telling you in terms of your take on the council's business. So we started, when we planned this work, with 2 risks, and those are risks of significant weaknesses. One was on partnership arrangements, the other was on the Proud Savings agenda. And in both those areas, we've done further detailed work, and I'm pleased to say those risks didn't manifest themselves in the significant weaknesses that we'd identified was a possibility. So in other words, there were no significant weaknesses to report in our value for money work at all, and I think that again is a credit. So we have 3 levels of recommendations we can make. One is a statutory recommendation. Those will be very rare. They are of their nature public interest style recommendations, so clearly none of those. The middle tier of recommendation then is a key recommendation. Those are reserved for significant weaknesses. And again, importantly, and we set out in this report, importantly, there are no key recommendations to make. So again, that is a positive that the committee can reflect upon. Finally, we do make improvement recommendations, and those are part and parcel of an audit. So what members would expect from either an internal or an external audit, we make them based on our expectations of best practice, our comparative expectations elsewhere, and in some cases just on that continuous improvement, raising the bar style of engagement. And we do that to ensure that our report gives you further added value. So the report itself has 4 sections, and at the end of each section, we've got a paragraph setting out auditor judgment. We appreciate that this is a longer report than you'll have been used to in for value for money audits. It's deliberately so in order to be more thorough and comprehensive, but we also consider that it's important that you can navigate that report successfully, and it's meant to be a public-facing document as well. So we also tried to, at the end of each section, summarize so that the report is as user-friendly as we can make it without diluting the technical content of it. I think it's important that it still must have technical rigor to it. So the first summary of where we've got to on financial sustainability is on your page 41. Then we follow that with 3 improvement recommendations. One where we raise the issue of improved member training on financial challenge. Now, we don't attribute that to a particular weakness, but what we do say is that's again part of this. We've made an observation. It's part of continuous improvement, and we would see that there's a training opportunity for members around that. The second recommendation is around the consultations that the council puts in place in terms of its budget and its finances. Now, that's a real credit to Walsall. You do a lot of consultation activity, more than we see elsewhere, actually. So that's strength I wouldn't want you to lose sight of, but I would also want you to reflect on the resource impact of those consultation arrangements and put in place a consultation resource plan in order to help to manage the forward resource requirements for all the exercises that you do in that context. Then the last point is probably the most important point on the document. And again, we don't refer to it as a weakness, but we do highlight the extent of the proud savings targets, and they are big and ambitious targets, and you'll see a benchmark chart within the report where we illustrate the magnitude of that challenge. So that's one we require you to have continued attention to, without again losing the ambition behind that. Then we move on to governance. We summarize that on page 49 and make 3 recommendations, one on a fraud risk and response arrangement, one on member training around governance, which complements the recommendation we made on financial sustainability, and one on succession planning arrangements for members of this committee. And again, nothing to suggest there's a weakness there, but it's an observation of an arrangement that we think you could put in place to continuously improve. Then we move on to the arrangements for the 3 E's, which are summarised in our auditor judgment on page 55. And we make 2 recommendations, one around the development of integrated finance and performance reporting, and one on the use of benchmarking and comparative review. All our recommendations in this report include management comments, and all have been agreed by management. Finally, we have a section that rounds everything off on COVID, which we summarise on page 59. I'm pleased to say we make no improvement recommendations in terms of the council's response to COVID. So that's our report, Chair. we're happy to take any questions and as I say, any observations that members would have on the recognition of Walsall within this and the usefulness of it as a document that we can feed back to the National Audit Office. As I say, it was the first time it's been done in this way.
Okay, thank you, John. Before I open it up to members, can I bring Sean in and Vicky as well, potentially as a double act? But presumably, Sean and Vicky, you're comfortable with the management responses that have been made to each of the recommendations in here?
Yes, we took the actual draft annual report to corporate management team to seek their support in terms of the actual management responses, and a lead officer has been identified for each of those, and many of those are well into progress at this point in time. So we're very comfortable with the recommendations that have been put forward, the responses.
Okay, and following on from that, then what we will see at the audit committee is a regular update on where we stand with those actions. So can we look to schedule those into the next meeting and the future municipal years meetings as well?
Absolutely, we can include those in the work programme that you'll see in June.
Thank you. So thank you for that, Sean and Vicky. Members, any questions at all? Any comments on this report? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. What particularly interests me is like on page 33, where it say no significant weaknesses, but improvement recommendations made, which is quite a theme of this particular report, which I find very readable. I mean, are we assured that the management have actually accepted all these recommendations in full and will implement them?
If I can respond to that, Chair, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Within each of the actual improvement recommendations, there is actually some detail around the summary, the recommendation and the summary findings, and there is a management comment, and that management comment clearly has come from management and has been approved and agreed by corporate management team. We have a lead officer responsible for each of those management responses.
Councillor Robertson, yeah, if you want to follow that through.
I notice also, I share your issues about the ambitious savings target for the PROUD programme. And one thing I will say that we as councillors haven't really had a sort of briefing, up-to-date briefing of where the programme is and how well it is doing. I think that would be beneficial, not only this committee, but also to full council, as it's such an important bit of our jigsaw. That particular, well, and I share your issue about the training part of it. I'm very much aware that there are not really many of us who know very much. We're all sort of lay people when it comes to actually looking at accounts and trying to interpret them. And we do need to try and recruit by one way or another more fresh blood, as it were, onto this committee, which would be extremely helpful. I think I made one or two suggestions to Vicky how one might be able to attract further members of this committee, because I think we really do need some, don't we?
Okay. I mean, on the latter point, clearly, if you recall, the audit committee itself did its annual review of its own effectiveness. I think that was last September, October time. And one of the points that we raised there was that we needed some improvement in terms of recruitment and succession planning. I think that's been taken on board by the officers and by the group leaders, I believe.
That's right. Conversations we've had with the group leads in terms of succession planning, also continuity as well, which the audit committee actually raised as well about membership.
Okay. So we're trying to address that. So that's good. As regards the point about the programme, I'm assuming that quite a lot of that will get discussed at various scrutiny committees and council. But Sean, do you want to add as to where else that might be reported for the benefit of all the council members, not just the members of the audit committee?
Yeah, I was just going to come in on that, Chair. We do have a March report coming to Cabinet to wrap up where we are on the programme from start to date. So that will be a massive update on the programme of what we've achieved and what we've spent on achieving that and where we've transformed from and to. Also, obviously, as part of the budget report, the proud element is significant in the delivery of the savings that we've put in there to deliver both this year's budget and next year's budget as being the peak savings efficiencies to be made. So again, we do normally cover that in sufficient detail there. And as you say, Chair, it does go through proud board internally, and then it obviously can go through to any scrutiny as required if the specific elements of adult social care tends to be the element that's been picked up recently.
Sean, sorry, Sean, does it routinely go through scrutiny?
It goes through when requested, Chair. So I think adults.
If the audit committee recommended that it routinely went through a scrutiny committee, would that be a problem?
That's not a problem at all, Chair.
Okay. So, audit committee, would you like to recommend that the details of the performance of the power programme goes through to a scrutiny committee?
I certainly would recommend that. Be a very helpful idea, because I don't somehow feel that many of the councillors are really got their finger on the button, as it were, as to where we are with the savings of, there's lots of figures, but I don't think we're as knowledgeable as we should be.
Councillor Jarl?
I agree with that. I think that'd be a really good idea.
Okay. Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, I'll certainly echo that feeling that it would be good to have those regular updates.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. And I think if we think of it in the context of this new annual auditor report and the overall summary there about financial awareness and training for members, that might not be a bad idea anyway. It gives more opportunity for things like this to be discussed. Sean, are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. I'm just trying to gauge, though, for audit committee purposes. Obviously, if it's going through scrutiny, will that be achieving what the audit committee members want? As in, it feels like the audit committee are looking for more information and oversight.
No, I'm thinking more from what Councillor Robertson was talking about was more about the information behind the PROUD programme. I'm quite clear that the audit committee's role as regards the PROUD programme will be the controls it has in place to manage the PROUD programme. The detail behind it is something that the officers, the executive and the administration need to deal with.
Yeah, I agree.
Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments from members on the report?
Yeah. Yeah, just to say, it looks like a really positive report. And I can say as an ex-employee that we have always had open dialogue in regards finance in terms of budgets, discussions, consultation. I think all credit to those involved in the report. And let's look to the future moving forward with some of the suggestions.
Right. That's certainly my view, John, Andy, was that there was nothing in there that was a surprise. I think you've captured it really well. I do like the presentation of the report. I think it's very good. And I note the recommendations that you want us to endorse this report for it to be submitted to council. So that's a recommendation that needs to be agreed by the committee. So can I have somebody to move that?
Yeah. Before, so that's right, Andy, that one good practice, I think, I know you've got the Redmond review response later on in the agenda, and one of the recommendations that Redmond made was that there would be a formal consideration of the auditor's work by full council each year, and this report actually does give that platform.
Yeah, okay. Well, there's certainly nothing in here that's a shock to me. I think it captures quite a lot of what you reported during the year, the issues that we've raised as well. So thank you for it. It's a good report. So I'll come back to the need to move this and have a decision. So can I have a councillor move that this is taken? Councillor Flint, thank you, and seconded. Councillor Robertson, so we've taken that forward. Okay, thank you. And we'll also note here as well the recommendation that back to management that the PROUD programme detail, the performance of the PROUD programme goes to one of the scrutiny committees. Sean, we'll leave that with you to determine which committee. Okay, so item 10 then is the internal audit progress report, and I think, is it over to you, Sarah, or is Lloyd with us as well, or is it just you tonight, Sarah?
I think it's just me tonight.
Okay, over to yourself then.
Okay, so this is our internal audit progress update on the current audit plan for 21-22. As you can imagine, there's been a lot of activity with work over the last couple of months in the final quarter of the financial year. So we'll be wrapping up quite a few audits over the next couple of weeks and getting those draft reports issued in the run up to the final month of the financial year. So as far as the current year's work is concerned, everything is on track and the audits have been progressing well. The main thing to point out, I think, in this report is that there are a couple of proposed amendments to the current year plan, which are set out in paragraph 4.5 on page 70 of this covering report. And that's to do with a couple of audits that we're proposing to defer into next year's plan, which you'll see in a later agenda item, and also proposing to remove one audit from the plan for the reasons that are set out in paragraph 4.5. So apart from those key areas, I haven't got anything else to point out. It's just if there are any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions at all? No. So what we do need to recognise is, as Sarah said, that it's for the audit committee to approve the plan, and as there have been amendments to the plan, it's for us to approve those. And I think those are very sensible. We have to recognise that officers often need to move quicker than the audit committee can be convened. So I don't think there's a problem there, but can that be moved and seconded, please? Thank you, Councillor Roberts and Councillor Flynn. So that's noted. And I think we also note you didn't bring it out in your commentary, but the importance where, for instance, the justice programme, the youth justice programme, which has been overseen by an external body, I think it really is important for the audit committee to have oversight itself of those external reviews. Otherwise, it loses the opportunity of seeing what the overall system of internal control is. So, Sarah, will you make arrangements, or will you discuss with Sean and Vicky how those reports come back to the committee, please?
Yeah, I will do.
Other than that, I think we're happy with the plan. There's no issues that we've got to worry about there in terms of the quarter's reports. You're assuring us that everything's in line for completion. We've got a month and a bit left.
Yeah.
Oh, great. All right. Thank you, Sarah. Risk management update, item 11. And again, this is down to Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this report provides you with an updated strategic risk register following a recent review. Again, key points to mention on this report. You'll see that there have been no changes to the risk scores. Sorry, no changes to the risks initially from the previous review. But it's worth mentioning that that CMC has requested that the impact of inflation on the Walsall population is considered as a potential new risk. So over the next few weeks, and certainly before the next review, there's going to be some work done on that, and an officer is going to be appointed to actually look into that. So that is potentially something that might appear on the risk register going forward, depending on the outcome of that review. So that's the first thing to mention about the risks themselves. In terms of the risk scores, again, you'll see there's not been any change to the overall risk scores. But again, this is in line with expectations, as there are a couple of new risks that were only recently introduced in May last year. Also, there are 2 risks that are already at their target score. And then for the others, there are quite a lot of actions that are scheduled to be completed during this year. So once those have been completed, we should then see that follow through into amendments of the risk scores as those are completed. And then just one further point to mention is that currently there are no risks in relation to fraud in either the Directorate Risk Registers or the Strategic Risk Register itself, but there's currently work going on at the moment to complete fraud risk assessments with each of the directorates. So as soon as that work is completed, if it's found to be appropriate, then those will be incorporated into the next reviews of both the Directorate and Strategic Risk Registers. As I say, if it's found to be appropriate following those reviews.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Any comments from colleagues? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know that none of these risks have actually stayed the same sort of amount of risk and are not actually increasing or decreasing. But I think one would certainly like to know if any of these actually start to rise, because all that red and amber is quite dazzling, really. I think we would really like to know if anything was starting to go wrong.
Sarah, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, and as you can see, that there's the trend is stability at the minute. Everybody's working towards their actions. There's nothing that is actually increasing at this point in time, which is good. And as I said, there are quite a number of actions that are scheduled for 2022, which will be completed over the next couple of months. So I would expect you to see a downward change in those risk scores during the next review that comes to you.
Councillor Robertson, does that answer your query?
Yes, I would like, if any of these risks actually started to rise, I think one would certainly like to have that immediately reported as an emergency to this audit committee.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Clearly, we need to. The beauty of the fact of the audit committee is that it sees the strategic risk register. It has the opportunity to comment on this on a regular basis, so we can keep all of those things under review as we move forward, and we will do that. So, thank you for your ongoing observations there. Any other comments from the other members? No. Sarah, I've got a couple of comments, if I might. We've heard from the auditor today, the external auditor, about the annual report, and which they draw out the significance of the PROUD programme and the transformational savings. And if you look at the strategic risk register, we've got item 2 is the PROUD programme itself is a risk to the organisation. And then we've got item 7, which is the financial resilience, which potentially relies on the PROUD programme as mitigation. And yet both have got different, they're both high risks, but they've both got different assessments. Just wondered if are we happy with the assessment of risk here, given the significance that has been drawn to our attention? Is that something that CMT perhaps need to reconsider? And I'll put to the committee, I wonder whether we need the lead officer for these 2 risks to come and give some assurance as to how they interrelate and work through on the risk assessment scores back for the committee. So do you want to answer the first part of the question, Sarah?
In terms of the differing current risk scores?
Yeah.
There's not a massive difference between them. I would say, like you say, that they're both high. They're both in the red area according to the matrix. But I'm happy to to defer to Sean and Vicky for more detail in terms of management's perspective of that.
Yeah, I'm happy to have a go first. Yeah, I think the main issue is in relation to, as Sarah's just said, there's not really much difference. It's mainly in the likelihood scoring, difference between 3 and 4, and I think that's because actually 7, 8 is the wider, broader resilience, so it incorporates both the programme but also the demand side of it, the cost pressure, so that it's the two angles of that. The ability to achieve the savings while actually dealing with all the pressures. So I think that, to me, explains the difference. It's the additional risk attached to the financial resilience from another angle in terms of the cost pressures as well as from a savings perspective.
Okay.
So in terms of the, clearly it's kept under review, closely under review by CMT as part of the Strategic Risk Register review. I think in terms of the recommendation, I would have expected external audits to have raised that because of the materiality issue in terms of the size of the 28 million this year, because it's an annual audit report related to 2021-22 as opposed to 2020-23. So there's a slight clearly a mismatch there in terms of timing as well. So I think I'm quite comfortable. I think it's useful that, but however, to make that link within the Strategic Risk Register and refer to the actual improvement recommendation, I think that would be helpful to actually incorporate that into the Strategic Risk Register to make that more closely aligned. But from my perspective, and Sean will add, I'm sure further if he wishes to, I think it's reasonable in terms of what's in there.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything Vicky said, obviously, Chair. I guess from my perspective, the delivery of the Proud savings is only a part of the financial sustainability. So clearly it's a big savings achievement, as Vicky's touched on, around this year and what we've got built in for next year. But obviously we've got other funding issues and local government reform and things that's been delayed and what the impact of that might be, which would be why the financial sustainability going forward is a higher risk than just the Proud programme. CMT are taking this very seriously. So as I say, there will be a report around Proud and how we're trying to morph that into business as usual from April. And again, they are looking at strengthening the governance, especially from the adult social care transformation perspective, as part of then the Proud governance process from April onwards. And again, obviously that will be going through CMT, Cabinet, through reporting. And it, as we've touched on already, it does go through scrutiny and will strengthen the Proud element of that within the reports coming through.
Okay. Right, thank you. I hear the points and I think they're very well made. So thanks for the responses. I guess there's still the question that we have had this raised consistently now by the auditor as a significant risk for the council going forward, the Proud programme. We've linked it into the transformation and the resilience programme. I guess the question for the audit committee is, how do we seek additional assurance? Do we need to seek additional assurance through bringing one of the lead officers back to the audit committee to talk more about some of the issues that they are facing to cover some of those aspects off that we're reading about in the Strategic Risk Register? It's not without precedent. We've called senior officers before. It's you're right, really. But I'd probably recommend it given the significance of what we're talking about here. Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly think that was a good idea. I mean, it's so much a key for recovery for this council that it'd be very useful to have somebody who was actually in the driving seat for it to actually report back, so one could question and monitor it.
Yeah, I think, let me just remind ourselves, the keys here about the controls. We're not looking at the performance per se, we're looking at the controls that are putting in place to make sure the Proud programme delivers. So I want us to be clear that it's not about scrutinising what's in the Proud programme and the detail in there, but it is about understanding what controls are in place and what risks those controls might face themselves. Okay, so would somebody like to move that? Thank you. And second it. Thank you. One final question, I think, for Sarah from myself. We've mentioned it earlier in some training that we had. I think we mentioned it in a previous report on the analysis of debtors. The new Health Act that comes into fruition from July. I can't see any reference there to that coming into play in terms of external changes in political or legislative environment in Strategic Risk 5, nor what the potential impact that might be on 4B, 4A and potentially 3. Can one of the officers, Sean, can you assure me and assure the committee that that's actually being considered by CMT and the council?
Yeah, I can definitely give you that assurance, Chair. So I'm fairly sure that it is on their directorate risk register, but because we've already started the planning, as we've touched on around sort of the debt recovery financial assessment side as well, we've got a whole programme around the adult social care end-to-end process improvements. And again, we've got a project that hopefully will receive approval tomorrow to proceed with, which again is going to make a significant impact in the customer accessing social care, what the need is, what contributions they do or don't need to make, and again, the invoicing and debt recovery around that. So we're looking at implementing something now in advance of the legislative changes, which will then be fit for purpose for when that comes in.
And the strategic relationship between the health bodies and the partnership arrangements, presumably those will be subject to some of the internal audit plan anyway, in terms of reviewing some of the partnership areas. But what I'm bothered about is there's no reference to it at all in the strategic. It's as if it's there, but it's not there.
Yeah.
But can I ask?
Happy to take that away, Chair, and just ensure that the strategic risk register has got everything covered. Like I say, there could be a gap around partners. We'll review the risks and just make sure that's covered off sufficiently, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Committee, I'm conscious I've moved that forward. Are you comfortable with the proposal? Yeah. Thank you. Sarah, thank you. Sean, thank you. And Vicky, thank you for your contributions on that. Okay, so we're now at item 12 on the agenda, which is the counter fraud and corruption arrangements update. And do we have Lloyd or is it Vicky?
I'm going to take that one,
Vicky.
please, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank you. So committee will recall that we updated the counter fraud and corruption policy last year, and that was brought to the attention of Audit Committee on 12th of April 2021. Since then, we've also brought an update to the counter fraud response plan in September, and this is a further update in terms of progress that's been made. So one provides further detail against each of the response plan actions, but in summary, what we've actually achieved since approving the updated policy is actually we have reviewed our capacity, and we've actually put an additional capacity in place through a Solihull contract for 2 years. So they're working with us particularly around updating our policies. So at the moment we've just updating the anti-money laundering policy, and that's just been to CMT and will be coming to Audit Committee in April. They're also working with us in terms of the fraud risk register and the fraud assessment process. So we've started having discussions with directors in respect to that, and Sarah mentioned that earlier in respect to that, and also reviewing and updating our counter fraud training, and also raising counter fraud awareness through an increased policy. So that process has all started, so that's in hand. We'll be able to provide a further update during the 22-23 work programme for Audit Committee. But as I stated, there's also an update further along in Appendix 1 of all the other actions. I'm happy to try and take any queries or comments from the committee members.
Thank you, Vicky. Any comments from members? No? I think it's a great report. It's concise. It tells us what we need to know, gives us the assurance. I suppose the only comment from me would be, as you mentioned, Vicky, a 2-year plan, 2-year contract with your partner. Presume you're already looking at the succession to that.
Yes, that's what we're looking to do, is actually build internal capacity prior to the ending of that contract. There might be aspects of that contract we might want to continue in terms of additional support for specialist investigatory work, for example, but we are looking to build internal capacity.
So from a timeline, when can that be brought back to the Audit Committee?
I'll have to look at the work programme at the moment, but it'd probably be around, I would have thought, September, November Audit Committee. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Noted, thank you. Okay, we're then on to item 13, which is the internal audit work plan and charter for 2022-23, and this is back to Sarah.
Hello again.
Hello.
Yes, this report is our proposed plan and internal audit charter for 2022-23. So just to give you a brief summary of all the work that's gone into putting this document together. We've largely based this on the council strategic and directorate risk registers, which you've just seen, to make sure that coverage is in the right areas, hopefully, for what the council needs us to look at. We've also considered where the Walsall Proud programme is, because obviously that will continue to give rise to some significant change in the organisation going forward. We also consider any emerging legislation which will impact the council. We've looked at the ongoing impact of COVID-19. We've also had discussions with senior management about where they see their key risks being over the next 12 months, and then the plans being considered by CMT at their meeting at the beginning of February. It also includes the 2 audits that we discussed earlier that have been deferred from the current year's plan. So yeah, putting all that into the mix, that's really the document that's in front of you, having had all those considerations. As far as the internal audit charter is concerned for next year, we're not proposing any changes. That went through quite a significant review last year with the audit committee's input. So there haven't been any significant changes to that for this year. That is pretty much as it was last year. So really, it's just over to the committee for your thoughts on the proposed plan for next year.
Councillor Robertson, we mentioned you raised a point earlier on in the discussion.
Yeah, I just wondered if there was room in this audit plan to look at the transformation funding and how that's, because that's actually very much tied up with our reserve policy and how that's been held. Not the actual way it's used, but some kind of audit trail. And also the Better Care Fund is another one that I have raised before. But it's an awful lot of money, 25, 30 million pounds. That would be very useful to know exactly whereabouts, whether there was an audit trail of value for money for that particular spend.
Okay, so the issue that we'd be looking at is how those are controlled, not necessarily where they're spent. And I think, Sarah?
What I would say to that is that in the current year plan, 21-22 plan, we are actually currently doing a piece of work on governance of public health spend. And as part of that, we have actually selected a sample, including a couple of transformation fund projects and funding streams. Also, might add, Public Health are currently considering changes to their processes going forward into next year in terms of the information, I suppose, that they ask for in terms of the funding and the outcomes. And they've actually included us in having a look at those changes to the processes for next year. So we are doing quite a bit of work with Public Health at the moment, as they're looking to strengthen the assurances they get in order for the Director of Public Health to be signing off on those streams. So I think it might be worth waiting for the outcome of those pieces of work before we decide if we actually need any further work going forward, specifically on those areas.
So when might we as a committee see the outcome of that? Because what we don't usually see is the full findings. We usually see a summary of the key issues that you've picked up.
Yeah, a committee can request full reports if they so wish to see full reports at any time. But those, given that it's a current year one, it would be finalised by the April audit committee.
Committee, you've heard Councillor Robertson's request that that's taken on board. What's your own view? Are you supportive of that? Yeah, so we'll move to receive that when you do present it, and we'll consider the further request for any further information once we receive that. But if we can see the detail of that, that would help us as a committee.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Robertson, does that address your issue?
Yes, that gives quite good assurance. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other comments or concerns at all? No? I did have one question, I think, and you may well have answered it, Sarah. We heard earlier about the debtors and the fact that the ASC charging system is under review. And we see, I just wonder, is that an area that you're going to be reviewing as well during the year?
It's something that we've raised in a recent accounts receivable report that we're just in the middle of drafting, obviously, because it's something we found. Going forward, we would obviously keep an eye on any recommendations that we raise in terms of implementation. So it's not being flagged as a high priority, so it wouldn't necessarily come to audit committee, but it is definitely one of the recommendations that we would be following up as part of our normal practice going forward.
Okay, I think given everything that we've heard today, my own view is it might be something that we'd ask management to reconsider whether it should be on the plan. I don't know whether the committee would agree with us. You've heard debtors, you've heard about systems, you've heard about integrated care. There's quite a lot going on with adult social care, and you've got quite an area of concern there. Sean, do you have any concerns that we might ask for that to be included?
Got no concern, Chair. All I was going to add was we will be keeping internal audit as part of the implementation, showing obviously the internal controls that are being placed and how it will be integrated with other systems. So again, there is obviously quite a bit of scope in there for adult social care within the audit plan already, whether we could attach it in if need be. But again, Sarah can't really make judgment at the moment, but we'll probably be in a position to do so in the next couple of months. And from that, we would then assess do we add it in or not anyway. So again, I'd probably suggest that we get to that point and we make that assessment and obviously keep the audit committee up to speed.
Okay, so let's keep it fluid like that. We've raised it with you as a potential area that we might want you to look at, and you'll come back to us when you give us the updates on the working plan.
Yeah.
Is that satisfactory? Okay. And then finally, why isn't procurement still on the key systems? I know you've got key financial systems, but procurement is such a key area. We've heard of fraud, we've heard of bribery, we've heard of corruption. I don't understand why procurement isn't always on your standard list of areas to review.
We are looking at procurement in the round. We're doing a specific piece of work on the hub in the next few weeks. So I guess it will depend on what comes out of that piece of work in terms of how we take it forward into next year, or whether we just do it as a follow-up, depending on the outcome of that piece of work.
Okay, so is that another one where we can say we're putting a flag over the top of it and we'd want you to come back and give us a considered response? Committee, are you happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Other than that, it's for the committee to approve the plan as it's stated and approve the charter. So I'd need somebody to move and second it, please. Anyone? Councillor Robertson, Councillor Joel. Thank you.
Move it.
Thank you both. And thank you again, Vicky, for your input there. Okay, we're moving on to item 14, which is the external audit planning report for the year to 31st of March 22. And that's down to John and Andy again.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're back. So in terms of this document, it's an indicative plan. Important that we stress that. We bring it to you now at this early stage for transparency, and so you can get a feel for our planning intentions, but it's not the full plan. The full plan will follow to a subsequent committee, and I'm sure things will change between this document and the full plan. And I'll explain a little bit about why as we go through. So one thing that I'd like to draw your attention to that's currently a live issue is page 157. There is an emergency consultation on the 21-22 Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting, and some big measures being sort of consulted on here. Now we don't know, which is again why this document is indicative. We don't know whether these will actually land and become impactful on the 21-22 audit. So you have one is possible that local authorities would be able to pause their professional valuations for operational property. That's quite a big accounting change for up to 2 years. We'll see where that goes. You might be able to use indexation in order to update your valuations. That would save a great deal of time and effort from the valuers. It would also save a great deal of time and effort from the audit of that information, and the committee will be aware of the fact that the audits of valuation estimates has been a big feature in why audits have increased in scope so much in recent years. So there is a possibility that could be slimmed right down, but a whole range of practical difficulties as to why that might not be the case. And the biggest one of those practical difficulties is this is very late consultation to impact on the 21-22 accounts. A lot of councils will have already put in train their valuation arrangements for the year and don't want to undo those arrangements. So that's one of the big practical obstacles that will be coming there. And I don't know whether this council is responding to the emergency consultation, but certainly that's one of the big questions. The second big question is a lot more straightforward, and that's the deferral of the standard on leases, IFRS 16, which is to increase the amount of work councils do in terms of bringing on balance sheet their leases, and auditors auditing those leases. So again, that's an opportunity to slim down the work of reporting and also the work of auditing these arrangements. And as those have not actually been put into place yet, that might actually be a practical arrangement that would bear fruit in this year's of account. So that's one of the areas of uncertainty which makes this an indicative plan. The other one is on group accounts, which I think we'd assumed you'd have a group accounting requirement. It's looking less likely that will be the case now. So where we quote an indicative fee on where are we? On Appendix 3, we quote an indicative fee for the impact of group accounts. That if you don't have group accounts, clearly there's no work for us to do there, and we won't charge that indicative fee. I will just finish on the page on fees, page 163, and members will see a trend of fee increases, and this is part of a national sort of priority, and you'll come to the Redmond review later on in the agenda. A national priority to increase the depth and funding that goes into external audit. I think it's important. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I, as an external auditor? But in terms of the role of external audit, which has been, I think, threatened in recent years, there was a view from government to invest in that. So fees are going up. They're not going up to levels that they were years ago. They're still below those levels. But importantly, government has recognised the need for councils to be funded. So has made a £60 million funding agreement to local authorities over a 4-year period, which in effect covers the increased fee variations here. And the assurances that I would give to the committee is that all of the additional fees that we would charge this council is invested in additional people So this is about investing in the people that will ensure that that audit is properly resourced by properly skilled and specialist people into the future. So that's the audit plan. We're happy to take questions on it.
Thank you, John. Questions from members? No? Can I just ask Sean, Vicky, your views on the evaluation of assets? Where do you think we'll be moving to?
I think it's a difficult one to judge at the moment, Chair. I think we do need discussions with external audit about what's acceptable from a valuation perspective to justify there's no significant variation to the valuation as at balance sheet date. So again, I think we'd have to have those discussions about where that acceptable boundary is as to what we can do on that. Again, as John said, I think that one's going to be difficult, definitely for 21-22 and even going forward. And those discussions really should have been had across auditors and clients as to where those boundaries could be. Definitely on leases, we'll be advocating, happy for that to defer for another year and possibly further.
Yeah, and then to stress, this is not something that in local agreement we could have with Walsall. This is something that would be nationally set across the sector.
Okay, thank you both. It's for us to note this report, so with no other comments, we'll note the report. Thank you, John, and again, very concise, clear report. Thank you.
Okay.
We're now back to yourselves, and that's item 15, which is informing the audit risk assessment for the coming year.
Thank you, Chair. Andy will take you through this one.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks, John, and evening, everybody. Yeah, so the purpose of this paper is to set out our understanding of arrangements in place as part of our planning process, our annual planning process. We need to make sure we understand the council's approach to managing certain key areas, which include frauds, compliance with law and regulations, identification of related parties, going concern, accounting estimates. The purpose of this paper is to set out our current understanding based on discussions with management as to the arrangements in place. We bring it here to you as an audit committee to first of all make sure that you're aware of the responses we've had from management and give you as members oversight as to what arrangements are in place, and so you're aware of the discussions we've been having, but also to give you a chance to confirm that it's consistent with your understanding, because I think we'd be particularly keen to get any comments from members where you don't think that what's been recorded or is correct or understanding it isn't fully correct. So I don't propose to talk through the paper in detail. It is fairly detailed. It's quite a lengthy document, and we're certainly from our point of view, we're happy with the detailed responses we've had from management. There's nothing that gives us a concern in terms of the responses we've had. I think we're happy to conclude that it looks like that there are clear and robust arrangements in place. But as I say, it's brought here for your information, but also to give you a chance to raise any comments where it's not consistent with your understanding.
Thank you, Andy. I'll just move to Vicky first. Vicky, you're obviously I'm looking at you thinking you'll probably be the one who's drafted all management responses on this. So you're very comfortable with this. Members, have you got any comments or queries? No? One thing, can I just ask the sort of code of conduct for councillors? The standards regime's not being referenced, or I couldn't see it referenced very well. So it might be worth just adding to it, but that would be the only thing. But again, it's a very helpful document in terms of just keeping the audit committee briefed on what those key issues are. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This doesn't require a vote, so we'll just take that as noted. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, John.
Thanks very much.
Item 16 then is the Redmond review, and our auditors, John, mentioned the impacts of the Redmond review, and members will remember that we had a paper brought to the I think we've had 2 papers brought to the committee actually about the Redmond review and the impacts. And this is just the update. So is this, Vicky, is this for yourself?
Yes, Chair. This is just an update to bring it all together, really. So what we've included within the actual report is the actual summary of the recommendations. So not all of these obviously impact us. So obviously when references to a smaller authority obviously don't impact us, but many of the others do. So we've highlighted the recommendation that was set out within the Redmond review, the lead body, and the current position on each of those. There have been some number of responses from the government over the last 12 months. We came to you first, I think, was a presentation by our external auditor Grant Thornton last April, and we did another update. So summarised under section 4.4 and 2.2, page 210, the main progress that's been made to date, including the revised guidance expected for audit arrangements during the spring that's due to come out, the additional funding that actually John just referenced earlier. We were expecting to receive about 56,000 of additional funding to support the external audit process. Lots of consideration of reviewing the presentation of the local authority statements at the moment, including standardisations, simplification, etc. So that work's ongoing in relation to future years' accounts. Proposed change to the publication date for the 21 accounts, again 21 to 22, similar to last year, to 30th November, moving this from 30th September to 30 September for subsequent years, but not proposing to change the deadline for the 31st of May for the council to provide their set of accounts. So effectively, it's just to try and provide a comprehensive update where we are with all of that for the committee.
Thank you. Any comments from committee? Just a couple of comments from me, if I might. Vicky mentioned about the development of more improved and transparent reporting on financial statements. And actually, there has been some work undertaken by officers that I've been able to assist in with from an audit perspective. So hopefully we might see that irrespective of what the outcome of the DHC, whatever title the government calls themselves now. So we'll be able to see that in.
That's been very helpful. That's actually recently been distributed by Robert to myself, Deborah Heinson, Section 151 officer, and so to Sean for comments in terms of the proposed amendments. That's really helpful. Yes, thank you.
And then the only other question I've got on page 214 of the pack, item 12 is the external auditor report, which audit committee will reminded we've just approved and recommended that report goes to full council. The current position there, does that contradict what we've just approved?
No, because actually we are proposing to present it to the next available council. Yeah.
Great. Okay. That's encouraging in terms of where we can go, and I'm encouraged by the fact that officers are responding to Redmond review irrespective of what departments and government are doing. So I think audit committee should take some assurance from that as well in terms of the commitment to try and do better. Thank you. Okay, that's nothing for us to approve there, so we'll take that as noted. Okay. We're now moving into the private session, and as we moved earlier, item 5, we propose that we'll now move into private session. So I conclude the public session and thank everybody who have been tuning in.
I'll just wait for IT to confirm.